arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive and you don't have to be afraid.
Welcome to the Bassline, everyone. Marc Girardot is the author of The Needle's Secret. In that book, he introduces the Bolus Theory, where he takes a different look at the mechanism of vaccine injury. He's a passionate writer and researcher. He was previously my guest on the Bassline, episode 53, and he joins us again today to continue our energetic conversation. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome back to the Bassline my friend, Marc Girardot. How are you today, Marc? How's the weather in Paris?
It's rainy. Thanks so much for having me, Jeremiah. I'm always happy to have a conversation with you.
Well, I appreciate that greatly. And I would love to, first of all, reminder to everyone who listens to this program, the way to support this program is by various means. First of all, you can subscribe to my Substack. I greatly appreciate that. Look me up at Jeremiah Hosea, that's JeremiahHosea on Substack. Also, you can go to my website, jeremiahhosea.com, buy the theme song for this program for $1. Or you could go to remotelearningchess.com and schedule a chess lesson there for yourself or for a loved one. And those are the three ways in which you can support this program. And bear in mind, I'm not asking for a direct donation. I'm asking for you to give me an opportunity to work because writing these articles takes a lot of work, and teaching chess lessons is work, and producing music is work. But those are the ways you can support this program, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it because we have no intention of stopping the effort here at the Bassline until some of these critical matters have been resolved. So thank you so much for your support up until now, and I greatly appreciate your continued support because I have great guests lined up for weeks to come. But today we have a great guest who also I want you to check out on Substack. We're going to mention that again later on, but he has a phenomenal Substack, Marc, spelled with a C, M-A-R-C, Girardot, Girardot. In addition to his phenomenal book, he has a phenomenal Substack. So by now, I hope every medical freedom activist is learning how to curate their Substack app so as to have any number of great Substack writers popping up in their emails, because there's just so many great people writing from so many different angles at this point. That's one positive thing that's happened in all of this absurdity we've been subjected to, is we now have doctors who have been compelled into journalism because they were being censored elsewhere, and normally you could maybe get some important information out. And then when the censorship began, Substack became a vital resource where people started just bringing the information straight to the public without the intermediary, which turns out to be a great thing in and of itself, separate from the circumstances that we're facing and the censorship environment that we've been facing. But let's get right into this discussion. And I want to start by asking you, Marc, to give us, and take your time in doing so, a refresher in terms of what is the Bolus Theory? What is it that you came across? And I guess reintroduce us to that for those who might not remember clearly, or those who might not have heard your theory previously.
Okay. Well, as you know, my background is in consulting. I was actually the head of Cisco's global team in charge of automotive. And the Bolus Theory is really an outcome of the work I've done trying to understand what was going on first with COVID, and then with the COVID vaccine accidents. And I undertook to do something that nobody's ever done, which is a root cause analysis as to why there are accidents, and notably, why are some people harmed and some people aren't. It's a fundamental tenet that people cannot let go. If you let go of that, you can never understand, vaccine accidents. It's some people are fine, Some people aren't. And it's not the fact that they're unique or different, etc. Because some very healthy people die, and some very unhealthy people are actually are not harmed by the vaccine. So the bolus theory is the outcome of that root cause analysis and trying to understand this fundamental difference. And what I've discovered fundamentally is that when you inject in the muscle intramuscularly, you systematically actually are injecting intravenously. I repeat, we're supposed to inject intramuscularly. It's supposed to go slowly through the lymphatic system to the draining lymph nodes and then slowly trickle down back to the bloodstream and the circulatory system and then be filtered and processed out. That's the supposed process or delivery process that the pharmaceutical industry has been telling us is happening with vaccines for over a century. The reality is completely different. The reality of it is when you insert that needle into the muscle, whatever it is, it can be, your buttock or your deltoid, the needle is going to cut through blood vessels, many of them, right? Capillaries, extremely small one, larger ones, but it's going to pierce through them, cut through them. And then when it's going to inject, when you're injecting the dose of vaccine or actually other products, it could be epinephrine, it could be, for that matter, what's going to happen is you're going to create a huge increase in pressure in the deltoid. And the deltoid is supposedly airtight or it's not supposed, you can't push liquids into a muscle like that without creating significant pressure in there. And the lymphatic system is extremely slow. It's extremely slow. So it's blocking the liquid as if you had some huge drain in front of you, right? You can't push it. And so what you're seeing is that by sheer pressure differential, the vaccine dose is going to go back directly into the bloodstream. And it's going to do that until the moment where the pressure are equalized and the blood stream can start flowing back in. In other words, the majority, if not all, of the vaccine dose goes through your vascular system. And that's a very, very big deal. It's a very big deal because the concentration at which it enters your bloodstream is extreme. Okay? And that means that it's going to transfect, it's going to penetrate the linings of the blood vessels. It can be the walls of your heart, it can be the valves of your heart, it can be your lung capillaries, it can be the linings of your aorta or linings of your capillaries. And it's going to carpet bomb them because it's extremely, extremely concentrated. Instead of being slightly diluted, it's going to carpet bomb them. And that's a certainty. We know that everybody is subject to this process. It's not, you can argue. Actually, I tested Grok on this last week. And Grok told me, yeah, of course, it's a no-brainer. There's no other alternative, given that, there's several studies that are showing that. Actually, there's a recent study that on distribution of the vaccines that was showing something very interesting. It was showing that the transfection, so the penetration of those particles in the draining lymph node, was no different than other lymph nodes. it means that's not normal. Normally, if that draining lymph node was getting 100% of the particles that leak out of the muscle, that organ should be the most transfected because it's got the biggest dose, the biggest concentration. It's not getting that, right? The heart is getting that, the lungs are getting that, the spleen is getting that, the liver and the kidneys who are getting that dose through the bloodstream are very highly transfected, but the draining lymph node isn't. I know, I'm sorry, it's a bit technical, but it's a fundamental thing. So once you acknowledge that every IM injection is actually an IV injection, it's first a high bolus and then a sort of slow trickle or slow bolus or infused bolus, if you will. Like if you had a saline, but not diluted. Then there's an infinite number of scenarios, right? Because that can happen faster or slower. It can go places that are more sensitive than others. Okay, so it's really a Russian roulette. Everybody has been subject to a Russian roulette for the past 100 years. Right? That's a fundamental thing to capture and to understand. And effectively, if you repeat a Russian roulette, right? It's not with 1 in 6, but it's you repeat it at one point, you're going to die or you're going to get very seriously damaged. What's clear is there are several studies that I already mentioned with you, one in Japan by Nakahara et al., and one in Switzerland by Bergin et al., that show that everybody's heart capillaries are leaking after the vaccination. Every single one of them. And the heart is it's a small organ, right? And so if the heart is hit each time, it means the brain is hit each time. It means the liver is hit each time. The kidneys are hit, okay? And if you repeat that over and over and over again, who knows, even if you're lucky, what's going to happen? And then there's a number of scenarios that are, of course, more dramatic, where the bolus hits in a larger fashion and is going to damage the capillaries. You're going to have thrombosis, you're going to have aneurysms, you're going to have necrosis behind, you're going to have those leaks in the capillaries, and so you're going to have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, you can have all the itis, all the inflammatory disease are related to the fact that there is no longer a blood tissue barrier filtering out contaminants into the tissue. So when that barrier is down, what you have is you have contaminants entering the tissue, and you have your immune system creating an inflammation to get the junk out. So it can be in your brain, and you're going to have encephalitis, or you're going to have long-term, you'll have Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. If it's in your heart, you can have myocarditis, pericarditis, depending on where your capillaries are located. If it's in your gut, you're going to have leaky guts and all of that. So that's the first part of the Bolus theory, is the fact that you're sending down your vascular system a highly concentrated dose of particle, and it's carpet bombing the lining of your vessels and creating huge imbalances in your cardiovascular system, one, as well as in your organs and your system, two. Right? So in the organ system, it's going to necrotize your organs, and so it's going to destroy that function or make it smaller, or it's going to make that blood tissue barrier leak. And if it does so, you can have degenerative disease, inflammatory disease, but also you're going to have issues, for example, like hypersecretion of hormones. You're actually releasing all your hormones. That's the first part of my theory. There's another part which is also related to that volume, because that volume of nanoparticle is going to go places that a small trickling dose wouldn't go to, because the body, we've evolved to avoid contaminants in the blood for certain type of cells. And that type of cells are stem cells. Stem cells are extremely important to life because they produce enormous amount of white cells and red blood cells every day. So there's this need to divide and multiply in crazy numbers, billions of cells every day. And they're also regeneration cells. So, you get sunburn, stem cells come and repair. You get damage somewhere, stem cells come and repair. So they're fundamental to life, and they keep our genetic matrix, if you will. And for that, they're hidden away from the bloodstream, and that has to tell everybody something. If you hide cells from contaminants contained in the bloodstream, it means that you don't have solutions to their contamination, and it can do stuff. And the two things they can do is trigger cancer and trigger genetic disorders. And I'm not going to go too much into the details. You can go to my book. There's really a long art. I explain in detail why stem cells can become cancer cells. Actually, cancer cells have all the features of stem cells. They have p53 inhibition. They have H-turrets. They have glycolysis. They because they're away from the bloodstream, they're not getting oxygen all the time. And therefore they need sugar. So they have their pile of sugar, and they can survive without oxygen. But that tells you something. If evolution, or even if you believe that God created that way, in any case, if God or evolution, or both, actually, I believe.
Yeah, it's funny. I always was surprised why people would assume, well, maybe God made evolution. I always didn't understand why that was divided as opposing necessarily.
I think he's smart enough to actually delegate, outsource that work. But in any case, if that was created, is for good reason, right? If it's for a good reason. And when you inject intravenously a product, you are bypassing all of nature's laws. You're bypassing all of the protections that we have. We have an enormous amount of protections, and you're bypassing them. So it's not surprising that you would have illnesses, domino effects. There are different dominoes.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Well, let me ask you a question relative to what you just said, if you don't mind, which is considering this process that you're describing. You're painting this picture in terms of this process in a way that we might not have thought about it before. Now take us back to what you were saying in the first place, which I think is just a really important point in terms of vaccine injury and the way that it occurs, which is you have people who are the model of health, as they say, getting severely injured, and you have other people who might be in very bad condition and they don't apparently get injured. What's happening there, if you could describe? What is the event that happens physically that creates for the acute reaction, which is relatively rare? Relatively.
Well, the acute reaction is not rare. It's about 1%. It's not rare. Actually, you can go up to 5%. If you look at the study in Switzerland, almost 5% of the people had heart issues, subclinical. Wow. And heart issues.
Right.
So the difference is going to be in the size of the dose, and because it's going to stay concentrated longer, and so that depends on a number of things, but notably the size of the vessels that you're cutting through. and how close they are from the needle's tip, because they will, if the vessel is big enough, okay, if it's like 1 millimeter, which is almost it's almost the needle's size, right? You can get a ton of vaccine in very little time. Now, in the mouse, in the mice studies, Acuitas for Pfizer did a study, and they showed that 48% of the dose went systemic, so went into the blood within an hour. Okay, so just imagine 1 hour, 4.8 billion nanoparticles going through your lungs, your heart chambers, your aorta, your biggest, and the rest of your body. 4.8 billion. And according to Moderna, about 2% of these transfect. It's not very clear if that's in vitro. They say in vitro. I would say you would probably have more. But even if that's the case, you're talking about square centimeters being transfected every minute. Okay, huge amounts across your body. So your vasculature is extremely large. Okay, let's be clear, it's very large, and depending on where it's going to hit, if it's fat, if it's a muscle, you're gonna ache like somebody hits you, or like you had a bruise or something. It'll pass. If it hits your heart, it's going to kill you, right? So that's the difference. You can be 16-year-old, great shape, but that bolus hits your heart and you're dead. And you could be an elderly with a very shaky heart, but you're lucky enough it went through and it hit them, some kind of area in the fat or in the leg somewhere, and it's okay. It's really a freaking Russian roulette.
Wow. Yeah, so concerning indeed. And yeah, I despise that word that I used previously, rare, for the fact that one, it's unscientific and non-specific. And it was so interesting, the contrast of the people who were saying science, 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 and then they were using the vague, unscientific term rare.
Yeah.
And I don't like it because it's non-specific in the first place. And it's not rare when it happens to you. Now it's your life that has been impacted.
It's not rare at all. I mean, the thing that they've done, consciously or unconsciously, sorry, Jeremiah, what they did is they fragmented the illnesses, right? So, for example, when they say myocarditis, they're not saying pericarditis. They're saying myocarditis. So they're taking their heart, say, oh, it's rare. Well, you have, okay, so first of all, it's not that rare because sometimes it kills you, but you don't know it's myocarditis, okay? But then they forgot to tell you about pericarditis, and they forgot to tell you about arthritis. And they talk. If you start stacking them up together, it becomes very, very substantial. Now, the important thing that people need to understand, it's not limited to those COVID vaccines. Okay, what I'm describing has nothing to do with COVID. It has nothing. It's not specific to mRNA. It also applies to other vaccines like HPV. Pseudovirus vaccines will also have that issue because their particles are going to hit when they're pushed in the cells. They're most likely are getting. I read an autopsy, somebody who had died of an HPV vaccination, and it was clear that the same phenomenon was happening. T cells attacking cells. And it works also for other attenuated virus vaccines as well as inactivated virus vaccines. Okay, when they're injected intravenously and the dose goes somewhere sensitive, they are also going to harm. Now, the difference between 40 years ago or 50 years ago, or almost 50, 60 years ago when I was born, is we would get one shot, maybe 2, 3 shots before we are 10 years old. That's about it. We would get 2, 3 shots, 3 shots maybe. Okay, you get a scratch, you get some kind of, that's all we got. And when that happened, some accidents were happening, but they're so small. And also, when you vaccinate children, children are filled with stem cells and they're growing. So their body will, take a hit and they'll try to repair as much. They can repair much more than adults or elderly. And so when you compare accidents with all the vaccines in childhood versus what we saw with COVID with the adults, it's not the same thing because children are much more resilient. But when you start adding up all of these vaccines, now it's like, I mean, I can't count. I think it's like 30, at least if you take out the flu vaccines, are
I heard
less.
it's 80 in the state of California. By the time you're 18, you could, not that all of those are mandatory, of course, but when you add up all the flu shots and all this other
Yeah, yeah.
stuff they encourage you to get, it's up to 80 in the state of
Yeah, I
California.
think flu is probably safer. You still can have the same thing, but the window of opportunity is smaller. Um, but as you're doing having those shots, the more you have them, the greater the chance of actually having a serious disease. Now, I think you had a question on what I would change or what's new
Oh yeah,
since
but
I.
hold on, I don't want to get to that just yet. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay,
sorry to cut you off there.
go
We're
ahead.
gonna get to that. But I want to hear, because we do have an international audience,
Okay.
thankfully. I get, emails, whether it be DMs on X or emails from time to time, and we have people listening in Australia. We have people listening in just various countries around the world, and it's so incredible to know that people are communicating internationally around these subjects. But I always love to take the opportunity to hear an on the ground report in terms of what's going on in France, because I'm a big fan of French philosophy. Actually, I'm a huge fan of the author Guy Debord and his comrade Raoul van Eigem, who wrote The Revolution of Everyday Life. And I always think of France to be this country with this sort of revolutionary spirit, that they don't want their indomitable human spirit to be suppressed. But then I saw, wait a second, they really succumbed to this totalitarian culture. I think I remember seeing images of people yelling and protesting outside of a grocery store they weren't allowed into. I don't know if it was requiring vaccine cards or if it was just the masks, but there was a totalitarian, a biosecurity sort of thing that was unveiled, that seemed to be pretty serious in France as well. Where do people stand now, from your point of view, in terms of this whole event? Because a lot of people are really trying to practice amnesia around the subject and say, "Oh, well, that happened. Don't keep talking about it. It was an emergency. Get over it." Are people still talking about the harm that was inflicted? Do you see any
Yeah.
medical freedom movement bubbling up in France in
Yeah.
reaction to what's happened? What's the update and from the French point of view?
I don't know if I have the full picture, to be honest with you. But first of all, there, unfortunately, like everywhere else, there are a lot of vaccine injured. So there's a very active um, movement, often local, but also national, of vaccine injured. So I was in Vierzon, south of Paris, a few weeks ago, where there was a gathering. There was probably a few hundred, if not maybe 2,000 vaccine injured who were together for a day of discussion. So there's that happening. Um, I don't know. You're completely right. I think the same thing is people who are vaccinated, they can feel that a lot of people have been damaged. Okay, they know, um, and they hope their kids aren't damaged, and they're trying to say nothing, hear nothing. So there's some of that happening. What's interesting is contrary to other countries, apparently the media, have been extremely good at clamping it down for a very, very long time. And a journalist a few weeks ago admitted that they knew that something was wrong, but they could not talk about it. He didn't say more than that, but it really felt like almost there was a military ruling that you could not say anything. So that surprised a lot of people. There are still some journalists that are talking about it, but it's certainly not mainstream yet. It's not out. The Figaro, right before Christmas, about 2 months ago, wrote a small piece on vaccine injuries, but it was basically discounting it, right?
Mm.
What's the term?
It's unfortunate, it happens, but oh
It
well.
happens, but it's rare. It's exactly that. So that's what's happening mostly. But there are people who are fighting. There's Didier Raoult who's fighting. There's Alexandre Ariancourt. There's François Xavier Zalbert, who's a good friend, and he's right there, very close to where I live, is fighting very, very strongly and getting hit a lot. And we're all hopeful that that Robert Kennedy will open the Pandora's box, basically.
Yeah, Pandora's box. Well, yeah, let me kind of narrow in a little bit more and follow up on that question in terms of your personal experience, because the other day I sent my most recent interview. I interviewed an AI system, and I was questioning it about the vaccines in particular and a few things pertaining to the COVID event, and its answers were absolutely astonishing. But I sent this article to a friend, and I got another one of those messages. I think this is just the second one of those messages for all of the links I send around to my interviews, my articles, but from an old friend who said, please don't send me any more vaccine related information or whatever, after not responding to any number of things. Um, and it just strikes me, it's different than any other subject, which I've written about as well. I wrote an article called The Untouchables. Why are we not allowed to discuss vaccines and vaccine injury? Like, if I sent an article to my friend about nutrition, would he react that way? If I said, hey, well, it turns out there's some things in our cereal that might not be too good for us, or, there's stuff that's happening in the manufacturing process that makes some of the orange juice you drink, maybe not as nutritious as you think, whatever. I mean, we constantly are getting new information, and the pro-vax people have turned it into this thing that we're not supposed to discuss at all. Like, so if new scientific literature is coming out, we're not going to discuss it because we've all decided in advance that vaccines are just perfect and the one item in our whole reality that would never be questioned. I mean, in everything from the mechanics of a car to astrophysics, whatever, we're just constantly searching, updating new understandings, new paradigms. But vaccines apparently are the first perfected area of human endeavor that we're not supposed to say. That's what they're implying with their attitude about it, right? So let me just ask you personally, I've written articles, you've written an entire book. How have your friends responded to you? I mean, have you had, what's been the response from people that that you present your information to?
Well, I at first I think a lot of people thought I was crazy. Um, uh, for the first time, I have a few very close friends, but two very close friends who were my bridesmaid men and or groomsmen, sorry, and one is very dependent on doctors because he's had multiple illnesses in his life. And it was very hard because he said, Mark, you're going crazy. At one point, the thing I was particularly vocal about was children. I considered that adults were adults. I told them it was dangerous. Nobody listened. My sister got harmed. My brother, my mother got harmed. So many people got harmed. But I told them they're adults. Oh, it's life. I mean, it's it's like people drug themselves, take alcohol, run wild, whatever. I was really vocal about kids. For me, a big part of what I did was for kids. Because I like nobody's defending them, nobody's telling. And so I said, they're going to kill kids to my best friend. He said, Mark, you're completely crazy. Do you realize what you're saying? And it was the first time in like 45 years that we had a row. So like my best friends are buddies. I'm closer to them than anybody. And so that was hard, but we never broke any bridges. We never broke any bridges. First of all, I wrote a book. It's like and wrote a book. It when you start looking at it, you're like, okay, so this is serious stuff. It's not like I have a, and I have like 30,000 people following me on the internet. Um, I was on Steve Kurt's scientific team for 2 years. So people realize that, first of all, also I'm a serious guy. I'm not the funniest guy in the world. I'm a guy who works hard and is not stupid. So a lot of people are like, what the hell is going on? And then today, I would say there are a lot of people who are doubtful but supportive, notably because I'm completely broke. I haven't paid my rent in 4 months now, so I'm probably going to get expelled soon. Um, so they were extremely kind with me and actually supportive. Some of them paid my rent, so they could. So I can't say I broke many bridges. I know the people who are friends, but sort of second level. They're like, whoa, Marcus, he's just gone overboard. So exactly what you're saying. There's a third category who are people who have seen it, who've seen harm, who they're, and one of my best friend's wife has got arteriosclerosis now. Okay, so I described to her exactly what happened. So they were very open-minded. When you're injured, you're open-minded. But I agree with you. There's a category of people who are religious, and my theory is not really anti-vax when you think about it. I mean, even though I have some serious doubts, what I write in my book is not about, do the vaccines work or not? There's a bit of that, but not much. It's about, you're delivering it wrong. It's not supposed to be delivered that way. You go to anybody in the vaccine industry and say, these are actually going into the bloodstream, everybody's going to get scared because they know that's what's going to happen. So there's these people who are religious. Literally, I remember having a conversation with a friend a few months ago, and he said, okay, Mark, so you discovered that, that's great, but first you need to tell people that vaccines are great. He was like, and that they work. And I was like, I'm not going to start lying to people.
Right, that's a great way to start your statement.
Like I'm not start going to lie to people to tell them what I've discovered. I'm telling them, do your stuff. If you want to do this, but don't harm yourself, this is how you don't harm yourself. So you're right. I mean, there's a whole span. I think there are a lot of people suffering big time who are completely lost. I have many.
There's a category of people, because I like that you're kind of in your mind, you're doing what I've done, which is kind of put people in different categories as I'm trying to figure out human behavior. And one very serious category is a group I call the silently injured. People who they're injured, they know it's the vaccine at this point that injured them, but they're not going to take on this anti-vax crusade in addition to their health problems that they're now confronted with in such a daunting way.
You're dependent on doctors also, etc. But what's clear is there is a number of people who are lost. I mean, who are suffering, or who's there's one of my readers, and she's become a friend now, whose son was extremely sick for a number of months, and the doctors were basically, he was having she will recognize herself. He was having epilepsy crisis, and he was young. He was the age of my son, Romain, 28 years old he was. the crises were accelerating. And she says, she was trying to see doctors, and doctors were saying, no, it's psychological. It's like you don't, it was really frustrating experience for her, and of course a dramatic experience for this poor young man who's starting in life. And she reached out to me, and it was very emotional and frustrating experience for me and for her especially, because I explained to her that epilepsy was most likely due to white clots starting to clog. And the fact that they were accelerating meant that more and more of them were clogging. And that meant that at one point, those small capillaries would become larger arteries, right? Because the clotting happens first on the tiny vessel, and as time passes, it goes back up, if you will. So I said, he needs to do something very quickly, and she tried to get him first on oxygen therapy and then nattokinase to dilute the white clots, but he didn't feel he could trust me or his mom, and the doctors gave him a drug, and he died 2 weeks after that. Exactly like I had predicted, because it's not rocket science. If capillaries, they for example, air, when you have these divers that come up and too quickly, right? The air bubbles start blocking your capillaries in the brain, and you get exactly the same thing. You get epilepsy crisis. So that was happening, and it's extremely frustrating, because also the medical freedom movement hasn't been consistent. To a certain extent, the medical freedom movement is as inconsistent as the rest of their colleagues. They just saw something differently, but they're not much better scientifically speaking. They're not very rigorous. And I'm seeing a lot of patients being thrown different drugs. They have protocols that are like that, and you're like, why are you having those? For example, they're taking aspirin and nattokinase. Both are anticoagulants, so there's a lot of things that don't make sense scientifically. But since people don't understand what happens, they're just throwing the entire drug cabinet, and that's happening in both sides. On the traditional side, there are some people who are actually using anti-spike antibodies or IVIGs, hemoglobin, but they don't really know what for, because they presume there's spike protein when there's no spike proteins. There's very clearly no spike proteins. I mean, there might be some remnants of spike proteins from the white clots dissolving, but there's no large quantities of spike protein that justify to be panicked like that. When you look at the quantities of spike protein, even the most intense peak, day 5 after injection 1, okay, you get one spike protein for 3.7 million natural antibodies, okay? And I think it's one spike protein for 137 million, specialized antibodies. It's like you're on your own, and you're gonna conquer Switzerland. Go try on your own, try to conquer. You won't. It's ridiculous. So the whole spike theory thing, circulating spike theory thing, is falsifiable, but it took a life of itself that's completely crazy, and it was driven first by vaccine manufacturers, because the longer you have spike protein in the blood, supposedly the longer the vaccine. Exactly. That's so there are plenty of studies being funded to prove that. But the reality of it, that was not true. Actually, the Harvard Medical School in May 2021 showed that there's hardly any spike protein produced after the second shot, because T cells are trained and they do their work. They just destroy the factory. So there's no production. It's immunology 101. So
we are Go ahead. We're running a little bit close to the
Sorry.
wire here. No,
So it's
absolutely.
what's it's I come from the consulting world.
Yeah,
Consulting with very, very senior people, CEOs of large car companies. Okay. So we need to be extremely rigorous in how we think and in the numbers and what we present. My book is extremely rigorous. There's no statement that I can't prove in 3 or 4 different ways, right? Especially not being a doctor or not being a biologist, I knew people would be coming at me. So my theory is unequivocal, and it's never been falsified. But the difficulty is we have on both sides people who have been mostly guessing, okay, mostly guessing, supposing, but not validating. They are not trained. To be honest with you, most scientists and most doctors are not trained in the scientific method. They're not trained to be extremely rigorous. And that's what we're suffering from. And hopefully that's why actually it's very interesting to see somebody like Robert Kennedy, because Robert Kennedy is actually being extremely rigorous in the way he thinks through things. I don't know if he thought everything as much as I did, because it's pure science what I do, and he was doing lawsuits. It's a bit different. But nonetheless, I think something's going to come out, but it's not going to come out from the scientific community. It's going to come out from, citizens like you and I who take on the burden and the task to try and save our kids and our loved ones.
yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, that's a good segue in terms of the next question, which is, how is it going for you in terms of, I know it's not easy, but in terms of just letting or getting the bolus theory to have its day in court, so to speak. I mean, how have you been able to present this to scientists, to people who could do something with the information? Has there been any traction in that respect? I know it's hard to break through for various reasons, but where do you stand with that?
Well, we're making progress. It's the book will be next month a year old. It's certainly not a blockbuster, but we've sold a few thousand, copies. It's been read by thousands of people, and I've talked to probably hundreds of thousands of people. And I have gotten a lot of very good feedback from scientists and doctors. Doctors who often are retired are more vocal. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
Let's be honest. But if you go to my to Amazon, to the Amazon the readers' reviews, there is a few in the French, or the French book. The book is translated in Spanish and French also. In the French reviews, there's a university professor in pharmacology and virology, and he was very impressed by how rigorous the book is, and excellent. He says it's excellent. I have a few doctors who have showed support, but I can't say I have I have actually someone who's in England who's been very supportive, who is an expert in vaccines, who worked 10 years as a scientist creating vaccines in a lab. So there's a lot of that, but I haven't been on, apart from John Campbell hosting me 3 times, okay, which is great. I mean, but apart from John Campbell, I haven't been hosted on any large platforms in the US, for example. And so it's hardly possible. And there's a lot of backstabbing in the medical freedom movement, a huge amount of that. I don't do that. I don't
yeah,
do
I've come across it, unfortunately.
There's a huge amount.
Not firsthand so much, but I've been a witness.
Yeah, there's a lot of backstabbing going on. And and also if people who haven't read the book or who haven't read me, so they don't. A lot of people think that my theory is just about aspiration. That's all it is. When it is extremely sophisticated, there's 12 different mechanisms of harm. I explain why you would have an aneurysm and why you have a dissection. I explain white clot. I'm the only person in the world who can explain white clot today. And I could tell you when I explain it to people say, yeah, it makes complete sense. Um, there are people talking about amyloids and all sorts of weird stories, completely unsubstantiated, away from the reality. I always go from observation back. I reverse engineer. How does this happen? Why does it happen? For example, why is there still a white clot 2 years after a vaccine? How come?
Yeah.
Right, stuff like that.
Well, yeah. Well, we only have a few minutes because I want to leave at least a couple minutes at the end for you to tell people where to follow your work, how to follow you on social media, etc. I want to make that perfectly clear. So, in a couple minutes, if you could mention any updates to the theory, or you mentioned at the beginning that your theory has become even more substantiated since the release of the book. In a couple minutes, could you tell us or share with us examples of things that would represent sort of maybe new additions to the bolus theory or new
Yeah,
revelation?
well, I mentioned two already. I mean, I mentioned them all, but the fundamental change or let's say
Update,
solidification. Yeah,
right?
solidification.
Simplification, right?
First thing is that almost all of the dose goes IV. Okay, I thought I thought originally when I did my calculation, I thought it was just you would push and you'd get a bolus, a small bolus, and that was enough to do it. But it's true that when you see the damage, the colossal damage of white clots, for example, it has to be the entire dose that goes and storms through there. But so that's a very important point. So that's big. The consequence of that makes that I was very conservative on the trying to be reassuring to people. There are going to be more people than I thought with damage inside their hearts, chambers, the valves, the aorta, and the large arteries. So more people um, with coronary disease, cardiovascular disease, arteriosclerosis, and all of that. Okay, because everybody gets it. Not everybody will be completely damaged. Okay, depending if the whole thing trickled through a very thin capillary, people will be okay. Thankfully, my son. So a lot of people are going to be okay, but there's going to be a substantial amount of people who are going to have increases in arteriosclerosis and stuff like that. And the third element, which was new, which is to a certain extent, it's almost a new mechanism of harm that's not in my book, or actually is a consequence of one of the mechanisms of harm, is the clogging of the wet clots. That's not something I had contemplated. I had thrombosis. Okay, so to a certain extent, it's the same thing as thrombosis, right? But it's like a delayed fuse, right? Because it's the clogging. It's not the blood that's coalescing and blocking. It's the metabolic waste and all the stuff that's going to clog to it. And that's the people we're seeing die today, I believe, are dying of that. A lot of it. It's getting, if you have small capillaries at one point gets clogged, and then the larger artery gets clogged, then you die. If it's in a very important organ like like the kidneys or the brain or the heart. So
Right.
that's the rest
Yeah.
of it is actually still very much it's still very it's only getting stronger, to be honest. It's stronger. it's also what's interesting. I had a conversation with Grok 3 a few days ago, and I got him to tell me that yeah, the only thing that is uncertain is where it's going to go, how big it's going to go. But everybody's getting an IV injection, okay, every time they get that. So we're playing here. People played Russian roulette 3 times, okay. But with kids who have, as you're saying, 80 shots by the time they're 18, that's 80 times you're playing Russian roulette. And
Yeah.
one of the things, yeah, last point, one of the things I missed in my book that I actually would add today is the impact on mental health and the impact on IQ.
Mm.
I wrote a few articles on that. If you're necrotizing tissue, you're basically in the brain, what you're doing is you are subjecting your children to micro lobotomies. That's what you're fundamentally doing. And
Wow.
depending, that's what's happening, right? So sometimes you're going to have issues that might be what's called bipolar disorders or stuff like that. Sometimes you're going to have changed personalities, right? You're going to from somebody who's extremely empathetic or socializable, you become completely, cold individuals, and so I'm taking a leap here, but the whole woke movement, I would not be surprised that the one of the under elements or pillars of that is an extremely uh, how should I say, impacting a condition of the brain. And there is, if it's those people who are interested in my book, there's recent articles that show their neurological disorders as a percentage, as a number of vaccine dose in children. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah, the fact of telling parents they're not supposed to question all of this stuff that's being pumped into their kids. I mean, I couldn't imagine something more stupid, frankly. It's just stupid to say, oh yeah, let's just inject our kids with an infinite number of substances and not consider that maybe one even ingredient in these cocktails could maybe cause harm. But
they
yeah,
don't even know that, what's crazy is doctors don't even know that they're injecting poison. They're literally a small dose. It's a small dose of poison, but that's what it is. It is
yeah,
cytotoxic. And they're
yeah. Dr.
injecting.
Henry Ealy said if you put it on a spoon and fed it to a child, we'd cart you off to jail. But somehow, if you inject it into the blood, something that's toxic suddenly becomes non-toxic, according to the pro-vax theory. But we're pretty much out of time here. Can you tell us how do people follow you, Marc? What's the best place to buy your book, which of course is called The Needle's Secret? You have a great Substack. You're on X. Where do people follow you? Yeah, they can't see that. If not, we don't. We're just audio, right? But
Oh, you're
yeah,
just audio. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. Otherwise, I'd be more well groomed for our meeting. I'd be wearing a button-down shirt and not shirt for one of my
Okay.
favorite rock bands, Living Color.
So, no, they can find me on X at Girardot Marc. They can find me on Substack. It's called the Bolus Theory series. Um, and if ever some people have questions, they can reach me on both X and Substack. I answer to questions. I try to be as empathetic as possible because so many people are in trouble. And what's interesting, and we haven't spoken about that, but I've through my work, I've defined this as sort of a bolus theory protocol, if you will. It's more. I'm basically saying, well, the science says that, or evolution says that you should start by stimulating your stem cells to do the repair in that order, and then take the bandage off, which is taking nattokinase and fibrinolytics. A lot of people have been taking fibrinolytics before doing the repair, and they're struggling because they're finding that it's inflammatory, or actually they're starting to bleed. My friend Steve Kirsch, for example, lost his eye because of that. So you need to, there's a way to heal through oxygen therapy, normal Barrett, for example. And on Amazon, Substack, I have a table for how long you're supposed to use whichever therapy you're taking. But clearly, in all the therapies or the treatments, they're all doing the same thing. They're bringing oxygen to the blood, whether it's ozone, whether it's chlorine dioxide. And the best way to get oxygen into your blood is through your lungs. Okay, there's no question. It's the safest, most effective, and there's more science behind it. There's many studies showing that oxygen therapy is actually very effective. Yeah, there's hope. There's really hope, and there's a gentleman with the name of William who read my book a year ago, who was extremely sick. He's been very vocal. He's doing much better. He's solved his POTS. He's solved his alopecia. He solved his COVID toes. He still has some degree of dysautonomia, but the rest is completely gone. And he's a new man. I mean, compared to what he was.
Wow. Incredible.
So there is hope. I really want to share that. There's hope, but you need to put your brain to it and not listen to people who are just saying, "Oh, take all these drugs," without knowing why, what's wrong, what's behind POTS, what's behind brain fog, etc.
Yeah, well, we're over time a little bit, so whoever hears this portion of the conversation is someone who's a real die-hard listener of the Bassline, because this is a pre-recorded program. I didn't mention that earlier, but we'll probably get cut off for the next program on the Progressive Radio Network, another outstanding program, of course. But thank you so much, Marc Girardot, for taking the time to join me today. And everyone who's still listening, please do what you can to spread the word about this important book. There are a lot of really great books in, I guess, what you would just call the anti-vax canon of literature. Sorry to just roughly categorize you there, but just this questioning of the vaccine process, the act of vaccinating people, it's something we need to question, we need to look into, and this book is a very important addition to that discussion. And I just think that if someone takes the time to write a book and put this amount of research and effort into something, it's really our job to help spread the word. So, tag Robert F. Kennedy on social media, say, have you seen this book on X? Do, at RFK Jr., he's on X, tag him, tag other important figures who might be able to do something about the information. Buy the book for yourself, buy it as a gift for anyone who's not shutting down the conversation like we discussed earlier. There's so many of those people just completely closed-minded, but let's reach out to the people who aren't completely closed-minded and activate their minds with new information. So thank you again, Marc. Keep up the good fight. I'm sure you will be vindicated for your righteous effort. And yeah, everyone take care. Have a great weekend. I'm actually off to Chicago to perform in a correctional facility after a television gig in the City Winery in Chicago. So I have a interesting little tour, a little mini tour of the Chicago area from television to a corrections facility, which will be a first for me as a bass player. But everyone take care. Have a great weekend. Thanks again, Marc. Enjoy your weekend and keep up the good work.
Thanks so much.
When you walk with open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did it long. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did it long. The highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend. Love's the deepest truth. Nothing could be deeper than love, my friend. When you stop and you take the time just to think about your life, you'll recall the ones you love and the ones who were always there for you. Better thank those friends better. You better make amends. Go and tell them now, yeah, yeah. Tell them what they mean to you. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did love. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby